Good morning, everyone. So recently, I got involved in some. That's interesting. I got involved in a bit of a thing on Facebook with my local newspaper, and they wanted to print what I had commented. So the thing that the lady then said to me was, "I need your age, job title." And description of certain other bits and pieces. And I was like, my job title? What is my job title nowadays? I mean, maybe I'm an art director? But then I remembered how much I absolutely loathe that phrase. Then I thought, oh, maybe I should write UI, UX designer, but no one's probably even going to know what that is in my hometown because it's not very techy. And then I was like, I should probably just put web designer, but that probably fitted me really well back in the day when I used to just be coding up perfect Photoshop comps. That would probably suit really well. But I was really loath to write what I probably think my job title is, which is a social media expert. But I always think the word expert, it just seems a bit brazen. I feel like the technology hasn't been around long enough for anyone to be calling themselves an expert. And I find that when I read other people's job titles that has this title, I dislike them a little bit. I hate to admit that, but I dislike them a little bit. And I realized it's because people like this have tainted my view of what social media experts are. There's certain words with social media experts that they just make me feel a little bit sick, you know. Thought leaders, they're always thought leaders, always. But I'm not hating on, let's call him Bob. I'm not hating on Bob at all. I'm hating on the fact that Bob calls himself a social media expert and gets that title by following 50,000 people to get 57,500 followers back. That's my problem with Bob. So I think the term that fits a lot better is actually a social media designer. The word designer transcends lots of different things that we do. And for me, I have lots of different job titles depending on what I'm doing at the moment. And for me, social media designer tends to just fit a little bit better. Ironically, though, this title seems to fit us better now than it even did back in 1999. And if you understand the joke about aquamarine and cornflower blue, you are my people, for sure. You are my people. So this title seems to fit us a bit better now. Being a webmaster, there's so many things that we have to do in our everyday jobs now. I am absolutely in awe of people who can call themselves full-stack developers. It is unbelievable what we have had to contend with over the last few years. We are now having to deal with mobile web. There's like JavaScript libraries coming at us all the time. I used to call myself a web designer, and I would not call myself that anymore because I do not know some of these emerging technologies like I used to. It is unbelievable what we've had to contend with. So going back to social media, I find sometimes that there is a little bit of a defeatist attitude towards social media. People tend to think, oh, you know, it's already been done, or I'm not going to gain traction, and people have already beaten me to it. So we are still, it's probably worth noting, we're still within the first 10,000 days of the web as we know it, not when it was made, but the web as we know it. We're still within the first 10,000 days. That is something that I wish I had on a poster on my wall, just to remind myself how new what we do is. If we then break it down into how new social media actually is, we're in the first 3,000 days of social media as we have known it. We are just getting started. 33% of jobs don't exist right now that will in 2020. I find that incredibly exciting. We won't even have names yet. We don't even know what these jobs are that we will be doing, but 33% of them don't exist right now. And this quote made me feel so much better about what we do. There is no social media. Social media is a slang term for a collection of apps and websites that now dominate the end consumer's attention in our society. And I think that it's really important that we remember that social media it is a collection of websites. Websites are what we do. So Jeremy Keith has said this phrase a couple of times, consensual hallucination. We went through a consensual hallucination back in the day when we were designing 960 grid stuff, and we were saying, everything has to be designed super small, and we all do this thing, and then we had a consensual hallucination about the fold. I believe that we're going through a bit of a consensual hallucination about social media right now. We tend to not think that it's our jobs, even though, as a little reminder, most of the social networks actually look like this under the hood. That is our jam right there. Even if you're new to the industry or you've been in it a long time, what excites me is that there's something on that page that you can read. That is social media. Social media is our thing. So the thing that we've been doing wrong, we tend to approach social media incorrectly at the moment. We should be approaching it much more in a how can I help you, what can I do for you kind of way. We've been through this a couple of times actually with web design and with what we do for a living. We went through this right back at the beginning when the web was a new thing and we were all having to explain to our clients, there's this thing called the internet, and I think it's going to be amazing, and I think that you should harness this. And we had to sell the benefits of being online to our clients. If you've been in the game a long time, you'll remember those conversations. It seems ludicrous right now that we would have to sell the benefits of being online to our clients. That boat has sailed. Everyone understands the benefits of being online. We then went through a similar thing where we had to bring everything back to being a little bit more human. And we had to say, we now need to cut through some of the noise, and everything that we do has to be a bit more human and real. We're going through this phase again with social media. We have not been approaching it from a, how can I help you? What can I do for you? Instead, what we've been doing is saying, look at what I've got. Everything that you view on every website, on every social media platform, most of the companies are getting it wrong because what they're screaming is, look at what I've got. And if you're still not convinced this talk is for you because you make websites, even though hopefully we've just seen that a website, social media, is a collection of websites, the average time spent on social media per day on any device, 1 hour and 48 minutes per person, compared to a meager 55% of us who spend 15 seconds on the types of websites that you and I make, which is kind of depressing. There's a massive, massive problem with attention on traditional websites at the moment, and especially in news-type websites. If any of you come from websites that have got lots of articles on them, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I love the idea of quarterly design reviews. This is something that every company should have been doing since forever. But when I say quarterly design reviews, I don't mean that you're going to suddenly decide to start using a completely different color or a completely different set of typefaces. What I mean is we're not actually talking about the strategic side of picking social media platforms for your particular business at any time. And everything that I'm about to talk about in this talk should form part of your quarterly design review. So the first thing I want to bring up is Vanity Metrics. So I would really like everyone, when they're in their next meeting at when we start all over again in 2018, to sit down and find out whether your company or business is chasing vanity metrics. We've all been part of these conversations recently where, for absolutely no reason, the boss just wants you to sit down and they're like, right, we want 20,000 more followers on Facebook and we haven't got enough on Twitter, and no one's asking them why. Where are we going to get the most engagement? Are we strategically picking our social network, or are we just looking at the buttons on the bottom of our website and saying, we have to have 5 of them. We have to have 5 social media buttons because that's what everyone else has. No one's picking them particularly strategically. And again, we've been through this stage once before. History tends to repeat itself. Who remembers the good old hit counter when we measured our success of our websites by the amount of hits that we had? I remember I had one. I had a GeoCities website, and it was great. It was all about friends, and I wish I could track it down now. And I had a hit counter and thought it was the best thing in the world ever when it would go up. But we used to measure, this was a measure of our website success. We're doing exactly the same thing, just on social media now. So I recently went to the Google Digital Garage conference, which was in Southend. That's where I'm from. It's a lovely little coastal town in England. And we don't get tech stuff. The tech scene is dreadful where I'm from. I do not fit in whatsoever. And Google came into town, and I thought, you know what? This is the first techie thing that has happened in Southend. Even though it's not meant for me, it's meant for newbies to social media. I'm doing a talk about social media in the next month. I should probably go along. You know, there's probably something I could learn. I never think that you know everything, no matter how much you do. So I thought, right, I'll go along and see how newbies were approaching social media. So there were 3 companies that stood out for me that were there. There was a man who sold paisley ties. There was a mortgage broker. I think you have a slightly different name for it, but I don't know what it is. And there was a guy who repaired washing machines. These were the 3 businesses that stuck out for me. And they all had exactly the same question, which I'm sure you can guess what it's going to be. They all wanted to know, how do I become popular? How do I get my followers up? Or how do I become popular on Facebook? Or very, very specific questions about networks other than anything to do with Google. Now, there was a guy in the corner who had his hand raised and was ready to answer these people's questions. He wasn't from Google. He had already kind of annoyed me because he was the type of person that when the speaker from Google was talking, he was the type of person who felt the need to, yeah. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is like the worst user experience in the world ever. Shut up. And he raised his hand, and he was like, he was a little bit cocky, he was a little bit full of himself. And he raised his hand and said, yes, I know exactly what you guys should be doing. You should be posting 3 times a day, no matter what the social network, 3 times a day. And you should also be going into your competitors' followers and using a bot. He was like, us professionals, we call it a bot, and we follow everyone else's followers, and then when they don't follow you back, you unfollow them the next day. That's the strategy. And of course I was seething because I was thinking, right, you've just told someone who sells paisley ties, who's a mortgage broker, and a guy who repairs washing machines, that they should basically be on every single social media platform and posting 3 times a day. Now, let's have a think about that. What would the guy who repairs washing machines be posting 3 times a day? I mean, he has to be the most genius content master ever. So my face looked like this. I was not impressed. And I was just trying to desperately blend in. And then one of the, I think it was Paisley Tie Man, said, what about this Snapchat thing? He was quite posh. What about this Snapchat thing? And Mr. over in the corner piped up again, I know about this Snapchat thing. Don't worry about it. All the youngsters are doing, they're just using it to send rude pictures to one another. That's all they're doing. You don't need to worry about that. It's for like 18-year-olds. That's all they're doing. And again, it was a frustrating afternoon, to say the least. I wasn't their target audience, and I especially realized this when the Google guy asked, so, what have you learnt today that you didn't know existed before? And a man at the front, he was quite elderly, stood up and went, the Twitter. And I was like, cool, yeah, I definitely wasn't their target audience, but it was a fun afternoon. So this is something that I see a lot, and we do have to check our personal bias on social networks. There isn't a place for personal bias in the skill set of a practitioner of social media. I had my own personal bias, actually, and I'll be honest about it. I've had a long loathing for LinkedIn for a while, and I had to retract it all very recently because I realized what an excellent platform it is for B2B stuff. And I had to check my own personal bias and say, do you know what, Sarah? Sometimes you just have to open that mind, even though you don't use it. There's plenty of businesses on there, and there's plenty of stuff happening. Now, the thing I do like to do quite a lot, it's my going to bed thing. Jeffrey has his reading Amazon reviews. I do like to look at the top charts. If you look at the free charts for any social media network, you should be going on this and having a look at what's emerging, because by the time stuff like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, by the time it's gained traction and there's loads and loads of people on it, you've lost the opportunity to market very, very cheaply, quickly. So what I like to do is go on there and have a look at some of the emerging social networks. And some of them might seem like a bit of a waste of time, but I promise you, if you get used to just downloading and playing with things and keeping up to date, you will always be able to use that knowledge on some of the larger social networks. So Gary Vee again said, "I'm stunned at the lack of practitionership in this space. People who claim to have strong opinions on one social channel over another, but have yet to execute a single ad on any of these platforms." I see this in my work all the time with clients. There's always someone around the table at a meeting that has a very, very strong opinion about a certain social network just simply because they don't use it, like the guy with Snapchat. He'd completely bypassed it, poo-pooed it, didn't think it was for him because he didn't realize that that's where all kinds of kids are hanging out, not just kids. There's ages right up to 34 on there at the moment. Now, Snapchat is a funny one. There's 150 million daily active users compared to Facebook, which has 1.3 billion daily active users. But as you can see, comparing the videos and the pictures sent per day, Snapchat absolutely wipes the floor with Facebook. It is so much more busier on Snapchat than it is Facebook. And as I said, 85% of Snapchat's 158 million daily active users are between the ages of 18 and 34. That's actually quite a bit older than I think some people had the network down as. And this is quite depressing. Snapchat's weakness is the olds. Sorry to anyone over the age of 34. Like I am, we have just been branded the olds. Apparently, it's the non-intuitive interface is really cool amongst young people who have enough free time or friends on the network to make it work. But the steep learning curve obviously puts off some of the older generations. So the app's novelty is its paradox, making it super sticky for the youth while keeping parents away, which is exactly what they like. But for anyone who has never seen what actually running campaigns on Snapchat looks like, it's really intuitive for if you're actually going to be doing this for your businesses or companies. It's actually super intuitive, and it's so much nicer to work with than Facebook. If you are having trouble figuring out how Facebook ads work, I would suggest you go onto the Snapchat UI and actually learn about that first, because it makes learning about the Facebook one ever so much easier. It uses the same vernacular, but they've got the UI, UX down on this, but you would be able to port that knowledge across into Facebook. So going back to our plan for 2018, we should probably ride that energy of starting afresh and take a look at some of the quick wins that we can get ahead with in 2018. So by 2019, video is going to account for 80% of all consumer internet traffic. That is incredible. If you are not planning right now, if your company is not planning how to harness video, if your company is not planning how to harness live video, you should probably start that plan or start that conversation this side of Christmas before we all go off on our Christmas breaks. And because video is going to be absolutely huge. It is the fastest way to build engagement and high ROI. This, even though we know that since 2014, Google has been pushing sites higher that have got encryption, we should probably think about, if we haven't done it already, encrypting our websites. It's going to very much help with organic SEO. And mobile ready. I am preaching to the choir with this. I completely appreciate that, as we are the people who make mobile ready websites. But we should be looking at the load times and the compatibility going forward. It's also going to help your organic SEO. So I think we're in a bit of an epidemic of pop-ups at the moment. We have to talk about this. And I hate these about as much as I hate image carousels. I hope that becomes a thread throughout the conference that Jeffrey started. This one is the one that baffles me the most, is when you get that notification slide in on Chrome or any of the browsers that you're using. Would you like us to notify you forevermore about this mundane thing that's on our website? No, I don't know anyone that has notifications turned on. But more importantly, from January the 10th, and this is going to be a great thing to put in into your notes and then bring up at a meeting if you've got a very, very stubborn boss. January the 10th is when Google is going to start penalizing sites that have lots of popovers. Yay! Jazz hands. I'm kind of sad that it's taken Google to turn around and say, actually, this isn't the best experience on mobile. It's not the best experience. We're going to start penalizing sites that do this. But they are from January the 10th. And it was surprising. I thought to myself, right, I need some examples for my talk. And I only had to go onto 2 websites before I'd found a whole selection of awful popovers. This is awful for many, many reasons because of the word bay. But also, people have started doing this very strange thing, which right at the beginning of websites, they're kind of trying to segment you off into different sections, but then if you choose the wrong one, there's no way to get back. This was a very, very bizarre example that I hadn't seen before. We also have another problem that I believe, I have no data to back it up, however. I couldn't find anything, and I've never managed to actually measure it myself. We have a problem of discount codes on websites at the moment. And it's a very interesting problem that I've been starting to look into and blog about just to see where it goes over the next couple of months. Now, I believe that the pop-ups are subconsciously alerting our users to the fact that there are discount codes available, normally because those pop-ups have some kind of discount code tied to your email. Sign up, we're going to give you 15% off. Now, if you look through, or if I'm sure some of you have had these conversations at your company too, if you look through any business on Google, at the drop-down, there will always be something about a coupon or a promo code or a discount code. Now, this actually provides some really awful things on the back end. So I've had a client recently who we've been working with to try and fix this problem. So this isn't my client, but this is a very similar problem. We have a company called Bloom & Wild in the UK, and they do letterbox flowers. They're beautiful. They were also, very similarly to my client, there's a problem with discount codes. When the users were getting to the end and they were about to buy, they were seeing people trail off for a while and then come back. And someone who I know who also has a Chrome extension that searches for discount codes, we've been talking about this problem. And it's huge. People go off to search for discount codes, they trail off. Sometimes you don't get them back if they can't find a discount code. So what some businesses have started doing, strangely, and this is why I'm using them as an example, is if you start to put in discount codes that don't work into a website, rather than losing you, and then knowing that they have to remarket to get you back, they're just giving you a discount code right there and then because they know what the cost is to get you back to that exact place again. So this is something that's quite interesting. It's what I believe is the true cost of remarketing. The true cost of remarketing to people is actually exceptionally high. And these companies and us as web designers have to start thinking about how we bring people back. We don't lose them, but we're giving them a little something, 10%. I knew that for Bloom & Wild, there were discount codes available that were probably 15, 20%. Did I want to spend the time going looking for it? Would I find it? I'd probably have to go through a bunch that were invalid. So I just used the 10% and checked out. Now, this is an interesting problem that us as web designers are obviously here to solve. And it, again, I believe, is going to come back to, and it's a very, very similar problem to long-tail conversion that Jeffrey was talking about earlier. We have to start thinking about how we can deal with considered purchases and people trailing off to go and do funny things in between. It's basically an attention problem that we have. It boils down to an attention problem. So, as Jeffrey was saying this morning, we're going to have to start thinking about, especially for considered purchases, how to get people to make a small commitment to what we need so that we don't lose them elsewhere. And then we're going to have to build a way to make the experience on the back end really, really nice, because we're having to do something that we perhaps haven't had to think about before. We're getting them to commit a small amount of money at the beginning, and then we're going to have to close it at the end without losing them in the middle. So obviously there's some money involved in potentially getting them at the beginning, and then right at the end we have to have these systems in place to make it really easy for them to check out. There's a site called Klarna back in the UK, which piqued my interest, because this was the first time I've seen it done for very small purchases. This is, they've started working hand in hand with a company called ASOS, which is a clothing company. I believe that's over here now too. And it doesn't matter how small the purchase is, you can use Klarna and you can get those goods to you the next day. You haven't got to pay for it yet, because these companies know that if they can get the goods into your hands, they will be making money off of you. So I think that this is something interesting to our careers that we haven't seen before, that is going to be huge over the next 6 to 18 months. So let's look at some network-specific stuff and bring you up to speed on what's new and what we can implement right now. I'm not mentioning every social network. For example, Twitter's not in this talk, because I'm only mentioning the stuff where you could basically go away and it's changed enough for me to talk about it. So going back to video, again, Facebook is really big on video at the moment. Marketers who use video grow revenue 49% faster than non-video users. Now, I have a business back at home. I have a store that basically is my playground for UI, UX experiments. And it's great, because it means I get to share real data with you like this. You can see on this, and maybe it's one of those slides that you come back to in your own time and really pore through, but you can see in these next couple of slides how incredibly low the CPM rate is on each of the videos. It is pennies, absolutely pennies for the videos compared to some of the images that you see. When you can see that at detail, the images are very expensive compared to using videos. So you can get incredible CPM on videos on Facebook at the moment. It's incredibly cheap. It's going to be one of those things that if you're not doing it now, you'll look back on it and say, oh, I should have secured those videos. I should have grown all my customer base when Facebook was really super cheap, and I should have done it using video. So organic Facebook engagement is highest on posts with videos at 13.9%, and photos comes in at 13.7%, although I personally have found that the engagement on photos is considerably lower than videos, but those are the metrics that Facebook gives us. Interestingly as well, that 50% of Facebook video content is viewed on mobile, and 85% is viewed without sound. Now, one of the promos that I do for one of my businesses, we have a video, and we have to make sure that everything is subtitled, and I had to do it myself. And for those of you who aren't aware of how to do that, you can download an app, which is a SRT Edit Pro. It's really cheap, and you can just type it out. Although Facebook will do the captioning for you, it is incredibly unreliable at the moment. I'm sure as lots of machine learning gathers pace, it will get better. But right now, the most sensible thing to do is to use something like this. Spend the 10 minutes to write it out yourself and put it onto your Facebook videos. Now, one of the most incredible tools that I still can't believe is free, because there's so many other companies who are doing a similar thing but charging for it, is Facebook Audience Insights. You can use this for absolutely anything, because we know that there's however many billions of Facebook users. Whatever you're doing in your business, you could use this as a tool to see who the users are for basically any industry across the world. And just as a interesting slide, this, for example, is on Facebook Insights. This is what all the web designers in the United States all have in common with one another. And it's links that you wouldn't necessarily think that collectively the umbrellas that we all come under, but it's a very, very interesting tool to play around with. And another line for your bosses: if they're saying, oh, do you know what, we're not going to bother with Facebook because we've run a campaign and it hasn't worked very well. Our customers just must not be on Facebook. That's what you hear all the time, and it's incredibly incorrect. It's not that Facebook advertising doesn't work, it's that your creative hasn't worked. It's always, everything on Facebook always comes down to the creative. So I started running some campaigns for something back at home. This is an actual screenshot. I think that this had been live for about 30 minutes when I took this screenshot. And I'm always surprised at how many people don't run multiple ads, almost like A/B testing, A, B, C, D, E, F testing almost. Loads of people don't run multiple ads because there's a common misconception that it costs more to do that you're wasting money. It doesn't. It doesn't cost any more. You set a campaign budget, and then underneath with the ads, you can have as many as you want, and then you can leave it for 30 minutes, see the metrics and see what it's doing, and then pump some more money into the ones that are doing really, really great. So taking you through some changes or some things that I've learned about Google recently. So this is an actual screenshot of one of my clients' AdWords account. Now, they got me in because they had a feeling that they were overspending on AdWords. Now, what you're seeing is what happened when I turned on conversions. And the cost on the right, £372.39, so probably like $450, was the cost of getting someone to fill out a form. It wasn't even capturing the customer. It was just the cost that they were willing to pay for someone filling out a form. And this was also, we had very similar metrics with the display ads, and there was a larger problem at play throughout with their display ads because the creative hadn't been changed. And there's also a problem in general with display ads at the moment because of things like this. It's just overpopulated, they're crammed in, they're not being particularly effective. So what I did was looked at something that a lot of people don't realize exists, which is trends.google.com. How many of you use this? Just on a fabulous. Some of you have already pipped me to the post on that one. Trends.google.com is a really great way of checking AdWords stuff. So what I did was I was able to transform from a display ad campaign and identify some long-tail keywords, which are much, much cheaper. And this was all done through trends.google.com. And I was able to just identify some ways of saving them some money because you can see what people are searching, and they'd missed out some long-tail keywords. This is another thing that is very underused at the moment. How many people have had or are having interactions with Google My Business at the moment? Not many of you, a few of you. So when we all search on Google, this is my business back in the UK. It comes up on the right-hand side, and a lot of people don't realize that you can amend all of that information. There's another misconception that Google does that for you. You can sign your business up, and you can amend every single part of that information, and you can also use it to output posts. So for my small business back in the UK, there was 2,700 odd people who found the business through Google. Obviously, that's very low because we're a very small local business. If you're a giant business and you're missing out some crucial information, obviously you can imagine the scale of people who are actually searching for your business. And another thing that a lot of people have forgotten to do, and it's timely because the holidays are coming up, if you have a big business and you have not inputted holiday times and the times that you might be closed over the holidays, a lot of people have forgotten to do that as well, so it's just worth noting while we're here. And a lot of people don't realize that there's you can put posts through Google My Business to show up in that right-hand side. So although there was only, I think this was viewed by a couple of hundred people at best, with my business in the UK, it's quite handy because I get to see what actually happens and who comes through. There was 3 people. We had 3 sales worth about $1,000 off of the back of this one post. So again, it comes back to being we're quite negative about social media when it's in small numbers at the moment. We're not necessarily thinking about engagement. So just because 200 people had seen it, my gut was to sort of sometimes, once upon a time, would have been to say, oh, well, I'm just not going to bother with that, because what's the point for 200 people? We had $1,000 worth of revenue off of the back of that. Some Instagram specifics. So there's 700 million monthly active users on Instagram at the moment. And to put that into perspective, that's over double the amount of monthly users of Twitter and 3 times as much of the monthly active users on WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. Now, they've had, the algorithm has changed recently, and it's upset quite a few people. The algorithm has changed to people whose content you like, people who you direct message, people who you search for, because it signals that you're interested in the account, and people who you know in real life, which I guess they're getting from Facebook, because they're one and the same company. So a lot of people were really upset about this, and a lot of bosses had questions about why their engagement rates were going down or why their content wasn't being seen anymore. And there's a really interesting comeback for that, and that is that social networks change their algorithms to deal with a problem of success. They can't limit. In an ideal world, what they would do is limit the amount of users we were all following. They would say, do you know what, it's much better if you just follow 50 people, because then we know that you're definitely going to see their content, you're going to engage in it. They can't do that. So they have to bring in algorithms to make it easier for us to find content without using the search bar. But the onus is still on us to create compelling content to inspire engagement and rank higher in people's feeds. People think, I think, if they just keep posting on Instagram, they're going to somehow get a lot more followers. It's not about that anymore, unfortunately. Some of the quality of the stuff on Instagram is unbelievable. They're not just using camera phones, even as good as our camera phones are nowadays. They're going out with massive cameras and taking creative like this. It's gone completely up a notch. The other thing is hashtags. There's nothing that irritates me more than this hashtag for some reason, no filter. Maybe it's a British thing, but loads of people put it on really terrible photos. Hashtags are the plumbing of the Instagram ecosystem. Now, hashtags are not my forte whatsoever. For some reason, I really struggle with coming up with creative hashtags, and I use this, even though I hate the name of it. It's called Hashtagify. I use this to look up what relevant hashtags there are for different creative. So hashtags are not there for people to read. It's a bit like how we separate style from markup. They're there for discoverability and should be commented separately to the text that accompanies the post. So how many times have you been reading this really eloquent thing on Instagram where someone's gone into the trouble to put some really nice storytelling together, and then it's like hashtag this, hashtag that, and your brain's going, oh, overload, overload. That's not what we should be doing. It should be coming into the comment. The first comment underneath your lovely piece of narrative should be hashtags. So hashtags have a 12.6% higher engagement rate than posts without, and 11 hashtags are optimal, although I've personally seen the best results from 8. Instagram stories is another really underutilized section of Instagram, especially for companies, because they're not really sure how to use it. And what we're seeing is this really interesting way of pushing traffic round and round, because it's obviously quite hard to have links in Instagram. What we're seeing is that in order for people to kind of cheat the algorithm, if they're showing up in Instagram stories, they're posting pictures of their feeds, obscuring the 2 or 3 photos that they've uploaded, and then getting you to go back and check their main feed. It's quite a strange thing. A lot of influencers are doing this at the moment. So a lot of people also don't realize that you can archive posts. This is sort of quite much more embarrassing than I thought it would be, having my own Instagram scrolled through on stage. When you archive a post, what that does is just take that out of your main feed, but it keeps all the metrics in place. So if you've made a boo-boo and you think, oh, do you know what, we're now going much more along the lines of this with our creative, we've made it look a lot more like this, but now we've got this right in the middle of it. I don't want to delete it because there's a lot of metrics tied to it. A lot of people don't realize that the archiving feature exists. And Planoly, this is probably one of the nicer Instagram planners that I've seen, and I use it. It's about $11 a month. And it's really, really handy because it also has some quite topical things that pop up in it. So if there's something coming up like a Black Friday, not that you're ever going to forget that Black Friday is coming, but they have some things that they put in automatically just to give you pointers as to what you could be doing with your Instagram creative. So I just want to blaze through influencer marketing because they are incredibly underpriced right now. And when they realize their value, we probably won't be able to use them. But influencers are just dominating all over at the moment. I hate the word, but it is what it is. A survey from Nielsen showed that only 33% trust in advertisements, while 90% of people put their faith in peer recommendations. The US influencer marketing industry is estimated to grow from $500 million to a $5 to $10 billion industry in 2020. So they're not going away anytime soon. And for those of you who don't know what influencers are, they tend to dominate a couple of social networks, only two normally. They will either dominate on Instagram and YouTube, or they do very well on Facebook and YouTube. YouTube tends to come in somewhere because they can earn so much money through it. And what they're doing is natural product placement. So people are following them, and then they are naturally putting the products that they're normally given or given plus some money. They're naturally putting those normally into Instagram stories or into their YouTube channels and getting paid quite well for it. So if you feel like in your business, influencers are something that you could use, but you have no idea where to start because you've not been exposed to this before, there is a great platform that has a 7-day trial, and it's called lefty.io. And what you can do on that is you can either say, okay, I know one person maybe who might be good for this thing, but maybe I need to find a whole tribe of them. You could do it by username, or you could do it just simply by some hashtags or some topics. And it's a really great way to see a whole tribe of influencers that you might want to get in contact with. So how much do influencers cost? This is always the million-dollar question. So it tends to change depending on how many followers they have. Between 0 and 500 followers, the rate is around $50, or just send the product for free. Anything between 5 and 10,000 followers, it starts to go up a little bit, roughly about $100. 10,000 to 15,000, it jumps to about $250. From 20,000 to 50,000, you're looking at about $500 to $1,000. But normally, anyone under 200,000 followers will do something for free product. It's only when they start to get to the rate of around 200,000 followers that they realize their worth. And then they will say, great, that you've sent me that free product, where's the money? So you can actually still pick them up quite cheaply. And when you compare this to how much some of the normal marketing campaigns would have cost back in the day when we were printing lots of things and we were doing just offline marketing, it is still an incredibly cheap way to market your business. So the problem with social media, I think, is keeping up with content creation. And I'm a really big fan of design something once, and then let's use it everywhere. Let's do it once and properly, and then let's roll it out across our chosen social media platforms. So I wanted to show us what we could do and what we could learn from who I think is doing social media exceptionally well at the moment, and that is a company called Away. Now, just as a show of hands, how many of you have been pre-exposed to anything from Away over the last 6 months? Not as many as I thought. Okay, that's interesting. Great for this purpose. So Away are a luggage company. And I really, really love to feature case studies where on the surface, there's not an awful lot to it. It's a plastic suitcase. In essence, there's not an awful lot to this product. And there has a tendency to sit back and get a bit grumpy and think, well, I could have done that. I could have come up with a plastic suitcase and earned all the millions, but we all didn't, sadly. So they aim to keep costs down by selling directly to consumers rather than selling through retailers. And they have quite a competitively priced bag. Now, they were best friends, Jen and Steph. They launched in February 2016, which kind of depresses me sometimes because I think about what I was doing in February 16 and I think about what I've done since, and this just makes me realize that I'm not working hard enough right now. They're both former Warby Parker alumni, and one of them ran the supply chain at Casper prior to that, Casper Mattresses. They raised $20 million in Series B funding, and the CEO says that they have sold $20 million in luggage and shipping 100,000 bags since founding in February 2016. Now, Away on the surface, when you're looking at the website, you're like, okay, it's a very well-designed, very, very nice, airy e-commerce experience. But what they're doing throughout all of the networks and the social networks that they've very carefully chosen is very interesting. So I think the brands that are dominating social media right now are those with the most agile teams who have exceptional storytelling capabilities while bringing value to their users. So what can we learn from these guys? And I'm actually really excited to hear Donna's talk tomorrow, which is all about storytelling, and I think we'll weave this in quite nicely. We're going to have to start learning how to take people on an incredible storytelling journey. What they've done seems so simple once it's been pointed out. They've been exceptionally brave with their marketing by identifying that the thing everyone has in common when using this case is travel. Now that seems quite no-brainer. You're like, well, yeah, duh. Of course, everyone's traveling. But this is unusual. You don't see many companies take such a broad approach to their marketing and pinpoint the thing that almost sits above the product. Product itself, suitcase. Easy to go back to the whole thing of like putting the suitcase front and center. They're not. They're saying, okay, the one thing we have in common with everyone is travel. And you can imagine the discussions around the boardroom in some companies. I don't understand how creating travel guides is going to directly increase our conversions and sales. But they're playing the long game. They're bringing value back to the user. And it comes back to the whole thing we said back at the beginning. It comes back to that, how can I help you, rather than look at what I've got. So this was the best example that I could find of a look at what I've got from a competitor luggage company, which goes back to just seeing how absolutely genius their marketing is that they have chosen travel, because it's so easy to get bogged down in the nitty-gritty of individual products. And this was from a competitor travel, exactly the same, they sell suitcases. From the smallest case-hardened solid steel machine screw, like we care, to our exclusive virtually abrasion-proof FXT ballistic nylon fabric. I'd already not cared about that sentence before I started reading it. But many, many companies are leading with this. They're looking, this again goes back to the whole look at what I've got, rather than how can I help you. So a way of creating compelling creative that is really quite quirky and fun, to be honest. This stopgap animation stuff that they're doing is just perfectly illustrates the product without being too engineered to put the product front and center. They're also working with influencers, and influencers are well known for creating stunning imagery. They go out of their way to, sometimes they even pay photographers, because the money that they're receiving from the work that they're doing with the company outweighs, so they want to have these beautiful photos, and Away have been working with a lot of influencers. Around the summer this year, I know a number of people who were contacted and gifted these suitcases. There were a number of A-list celebrities. In my previous work, I used to work in LA and doing marketing for Justin Bieber's manager. And we knew a load of celebrities who got sent these suitcases. They were just gifted them. And these celebrities, of course, then get papped going through the airports on what's on their hand, what they're dragging behind them, but an Away suitcase. And over the summer, there was so many. If you go back and look at some of the images over that time, you'll see that Away suitcases were featuring probably 3 or 4 times a week. And that was free. And these were A-list celebrities. You can't buy some of the marketing like that. It's just unbelievable. A bag that costs them probably around $80. When you compare that to the cost of like gifting the bag versus how much they would spend to get that traction elsewhere in traditional marketing, it blows my mind. So this was their Thanksgiving campaign. And you can see that the product is not front and center. It has a very organic, very real feel to it. Some of the pieces don't even have a suitcase in them at all. But yet, the whole time, they're promoting their brand. They always have something to talk about, because whether they are looking at what's topical, like with Thanksgiving, they did a whole thing around Thanksgiving. They also work with collaborations. They've done a great collaboration with Popsuki, where they came out with these, what's now called, I believe, millennial pink. Millennial pink is actually a thing, everyone. They were doing these incredible collaborations with people, so they've constantly got these pipes filled with great creative and great story. In order to keep up with the amount of social media that is expected of us nowadays, we are going to have to turn into exceptional storytellers. Their Google display ads were beautiful, very simple, but beautiful, and worked. And offline, they had some very, very specific things that they were doing. And this seemed so simple when it was pointed out, but they just took over all the travel, we call them bins, but I think you guys, the travel trays that we put all of our stuff into when we're at the airport. I think every travel tray at Chicago Airport had one of these in. And it was something so simple, but they just seemed to be everywhere over the summer. But interestingly, they too are not without the whole promo code problem. As I was searching through getting screenshots for this, I saw that, again, it comes back to that problem of promo codes that we were talking about at the beginning, and they will have to figure that out. But their creative is absolutely stunning. Wherever you go, they've got great images. They're reusing those images on their website. They're reusing it on Twitter. And another thing that I do when I want to try and figure out who they're marketing to, or what angle they've taken with their marketing, or what they're going against with competitors, is I use this website, I think it's called SpyFu, and it will tell you some interesting things about what your competitors are remarketing against, and it might give you some ideas for creative going forward. So it doesn't matter where you go on Away. Everything looks beautiful, but they're also telling other stories about travel. They have all these other sections on their website. They also have a magazine called Here, where they are telling great stories about travel. And of course, in some of those photographs, people just happen to be holding one of these suitcases, but that isn't what's front and center for them. Even the way that they handle haters on Twitter, I had to say, I found this and I thought, you know, they are a great company, but I'm sure people sometimes just look at their suitcases and think, do you know what, it's just a plastic suitcase. I don't want to pay $300 for just a plastic suitcase that gets bashed around. And even the way they handle haters has been designed. That definitely is something that they must have sat down and gone, right, just put front and center that we will give them the money back and we have a guarantee and everything else. It's not unusual, but every single touch point that you find on Away has been done exceptionally well. This is one of their email campaigns. And right back to the end experience of purchasing. A lot of companies are using this now. I believe it's called Nava. And it's just a great system where if you've bought something, it automatically puts the tracking number in, and it will tell you whereabouts in the process your parcel is or where it is. It sometimes has a map. And then you have the ability to have some creative on the right-hand side that can change up whenever you need it to, and it will also import Instagram. But it is a really, really great experience, even if they are buying that experience. So just to finish up, I wanted to talk about when things go bad, because I think we all have a little sadistic side that kind of likes when things go bad for other companies. So when I was researching, I came across this collaboration. So Cath Kidston is quite a British brand, and they were doing a collaboration with Peter Pan. And on the surface, they seemed to be doing everything absolutely perfectly. They had great Instagram creative. They had really great email campaigns. But when I started to read about how this was going to go down, I thought, do you know what? I think something's going to happen here. And I think I should probably be at my computer because I think it might make a great case study for AEA next year. And it was just, it was just an accident waiting to happen. But on the surface, they had created an absolutely beautiful campaign. So they were putting these little sort of tasters out everywhere saying, oh, you know, it's 2 days to go till the sale, 1 day to go till the sale. Can't sleep because you're so excited about the sale for Peter Pan items. And then they sent through a password to allow you access to the website. So when it all went live, Your password was star, and you got to go onto the website. And it all felt quite special. They'd actually managed to create an experience that somehow felt really super special for once. Oh, nice flashing thing. And so when you actually went to go onto the website, it held you in a holding pattern, and you had X amount of minutes to wait. And that experience started to become a bit painful, I'll be honest. But once you had waited your 12 minutes, you got onto the website. Now, us web designers should be able to spot fairly simply what is wrong with this page. If you're going to try and buy something, what do we need? They had missed the buy button off of the entire campaign. And then what started to happen was when you do something like this, it turns to angry Twitter users. Why can't I buy? Where's the buy button? Hundreds of these messages started flooding the poor Cath Kidston team. And what I find interesting about this, and this is something that we've seen before many times, the users aren't blaming Cath Kidston. When you actually go and read what they're saying, they believe that they're the only people without a buy button. And I find that quite an interesting thing, that users are actually exceptionally more patient than we give them credit for. They were actually thinking the problem was with them rather than the entire website. So then Cath Kidston basically popped up and the whole team said, oh, you know what, don't worry, we're going to fix this. We're going to fix this problem of no buy button after we've just hyped up this entire sale. So then it chucked you back to this. You had another 20 minutes to wait. And then lo and behold, the buy button came back. Yay! When you pressed the buy button, this is what happened. I gave up at that point. I don't know what happened after that, I'm afraid. That's where the story sadly ends. But I did, just because I thought it would be fair, I reached out on Twitter and I said, do you know what, was anyone, as a long shot, was anyone part of the Cath Kidston campaign who I could talk to about what happened? Because there was a really sadistic part of me that hoped someone just went, we'll be honest, we just didn't code the buy button in. I'd be like, brilliant, we all make mistakes, don't worry. It's good. We all make mistakes. But funnily enough, no one really wanted to talk to me. One guy said, oh, do you know what? My girlfriend was on the campaign for that. I was like, great, get her to email me because I really, really want to learn about this. She never emailed me. I don't blame her. But when things go wrong, they can be quite amusing. Even if you've got the greatest social media campaign at all, I think the moral of that story is ensure you've coded up the buy button. So just to take us back as a recap, the whole design once, use everywhere. The problem on social media is keeping up with the content creation, the pace at which it moves, unless you have got exceptional storytelling abilities and you've pre-planned some of this stuff and realized what's sitting above your product, what has everyone who's buying your product got in common. Where can you harness that? How can you design that once and then use it across every very carefully chosen social media platform? Don't be like the washing machine repairer and feel like you have to post on every single network. Choose it with strategic planning. Ensure the network that you are strategically pursuing makes sense for your business. Goes back to the whole story at the beginning. Don't just choose one because everyone else is on it. Sometimes they simply do not make sense for your business, and that's a conversation for you to have maybe as a team or with your bosses, but some social networks just truly do not make sense for some businesses to be on. And find your story for social media longevity. Thank you very much. I'll be around for the next 3 days. If you have questions, let's geek out about some social media stuff. Thank you.